And following on to this, Paul, just kind of along the same type of scenario here, would you guys do a mix of opportunistic spot selling? Given the current potential production profile that you mentioned, would you guys look at a little bit of opportunistic spot selling? And would you possibly mix that with some long-term contracting to lock in some of that baseline for the company?
Yes, and I'll qualify that more now. With respect to term contracts and everything, I see those as effectively base loading or supporting the minimum, whatever we need to maintain our production. Not necessarily at the top end, but to create that. There's always, every uranium operation has a threshold point where you go from, say, an operating cost of sub $20, let's say sub $15, to a point where you're over $20 a pound, and it's a fairly fine line. We want to keep our base demand, the revenue source, at that point. So typically it's about that 50% production capacity of the facility where you get that break point. And that's where your fixed costs are no longer weighting down the total operating cost. I want to effectively base load the fixed costs of my production through term contracts, and then use the upside exposure to the spot market. And there are a couple of ways one could do that. One could have basically a spot indexed offtake agreement, or you could do it directly in the spot market. I have done both. And it's just a matter of kind of what terms are there and everything else. But you'll get rewarded by having long-term contracts to support the economics of your project. But if you don't have the ability to see some exposure to upside, you get punished for that as well. But I'm not looking at from a reward punishment part of it. I'm looking at from an economics part of it. And when I worked for a company called Mustang Uranium, which was a privately held company, we had a mix of both, and we were very successful with it. And I see that going forward here too. And it keeps you from being too exposed to one pricing mechanism versus another.